What a wonderful group of people who are up here with me today. I'd like to introduce Lynda Lowery. You all saw her in the film and her spunk. Lynda was the youngest person to march from Selma to Montgomery back in the day, and was one of those child activists, and as you saw, has quite a sense of humor and is an amazing person. And Joanne Bland, her sister is Joanne Bland. Is co-founder and director of the National Voting Rights Museum in Selma. And as a child, Joanne was also an active participant in the Selma voting rights marches, including Bloody Sunday and Turnaround Tuesday. And she was the youngest person jailed during the Civil Rights Movement. Right next to me, we have Jerome Dees. Y'all are clapping and you don't know why. Maybe I should introduce. Jerome Dees is the Southern Poverty Law Center's Alabama Policy Director for the Action Fund at the SPLC. Did I get that right? Yes. And finally, JaiGregory Clarke represents the Vote in My Honor project and serves as community organizer for Faith in Action, Alabama's Birmingham hub and voter rights restoration campaign. And making his way down the aisle right now is J. Mason Davis. He grew up in Alabama during segregation, went to law school at New York University, and became the first African-American partner in a major law firm in Birmingham. Welcome. I neglected to mention, Lynda recently won a huge honor that I need to lift up. She is listed as one of the 25 women who shape our state. So, well deserved. I would also like to point out we have another person from the film here with us this evening, and that is the legend herself, Virginia Volker. Virginia? When I was being interviewed to be the minister of this church, Virginia made me promise that I would cause a lot of good trouble. So I hope I live up to it, Virginia. So, our dear panelists, I know some of you have seen this film more than once, and some of you, it may have been the first time, but I would just like whoever would like to share anything that particularly touched you about the film as you saw it today. It's on, I think. Just, yeah. No.
It's not on.
It is not on. It is not on, Brent. Thank you.
Is it on?
There we go. We didn't want to miss a thing.
Can you hear me now? I was extremely excited about the fact that it shows so many young people. Oftentimes we see the generals, that's what I call Dr. King, Reverend Bevel, James Orange, and others. You see the adults leading, because Dr. King brought exactly what he was supposed to bring to every movement. He brought money. No revolution can be fought without finance. He brought motivation. To this day, when I hear his voice, I want to get up and save the world. And he brought the media. And wherever he was, they took his picture. So that's where the old preachers would, forgive me, preachers. The old preachers would gather around Dr. King. and the children were left out, and we were the foot soldiers. We were the foot soldiers. We were in the trenches every day, and the film did an excellent job at showing that we were.
I would like to add that I had seen the film before, and what got me then and got me now was the fact that the white folks came to Selma, Alabama white folks, not northern white, them Alabama white folks came to Selma on March 6th, that Saturday, and marched. It was, and I was so amazed because I was seeing Alabama white folks standing up for my daddy and my grandmother and our dead mother and us, standing up for people of color. It was white folks, and that amazed me because they came from Alabama. And it made me think, even at the age of 14, that it is some good white folks in Alabama. These people come from Birmingham, so I guess I must move to Birmingham one day to find them. But that it was some good, they stopped being good white folks and they started being good people. So it was some good people in Alabama.
I think the thing that stands out or stood out to me, and I'll admit I had my thoughts together before seeing the film, and after seeing it just kind of completely rattled me just because it was so powerful. But the one thing that kind of pierced through that is that the struggle is just that, the struggle. And as Dr. King said, the march continues, the struggle continues to this day. And in my role at Southern Poverty Law Center, I am down at the state capitol every single day when the doors open until they close. And just as the work that we do is continual, there are folks pulling on that moral arc of the universe in the complete opposite direction, and they have not stopped since 1965. And so I think that's the thing that this film really crystallized, is that we can't rest on the work that you all did 60 years ago, that we are battling a lot of those same systemic issues in 2024. We are almost exactly 60 years from what we saw there, and we are battling those same retrenched issues. And so it is incumbent upon folks like JaiGregory and myself to step up, because the foundation has been laid, but the work, just as the struggle persists, the work must persist as well.
I'm now 89 years old. And I have now practiced law for 65 years. Longer than most of you folks have been alive. That's right. And I've had a very varied life. When I was in high school, there was only one high school in Birmingham, not outside the city limits, because in the county there were other high schools. But if you lived in the city of Birmingham, there was only one high school to which you could attend. if you were a person that looked somewhat like me. And that was Parker High School. Looks like I have some classmates out there. Well, when I went to Parker, it was all segregation, all. And because of that, most blacks lived in a vacuum. If you were 18 and under, you knew very little about segregation. You went to church and you went to school. If you had a little job, you went to church, that little job, and then you went to school. Well, I graduated from Parker in 1948. And then I attended Talladega College. And Talladega was the only integrated school operating in the state of Alabama. The only one. And all of my professors were white, except three. Mr. Haynes, Mr. Hobson, and Mr. Hogan. There were 5 Jewish professors that had come, and they had been victims of the Holocaust. They were survivors. And they came to Talladega, and they treated us very, very nicely. They were tough as teachers, and you had to get their work, but as individuals, they were very, very nice. And I graduated in 1956 after having been there 4 years, and I went to Buffalo, New York, because the University of Alabama refused to allow me to attend law school in Tuscaloosa. And a little bit later, I'll tell you an anomaly that happened. But I had to go to the State University of New York. And there were 4 black students in my class. They made up the entire student body of black people that were in the entire law school. 2 of them dropped out at the end of the first semester. And 2 of us remained there, and we graduated. And the interesting part about that was that both of us made law review. Law review, well, a lot of you know about law review. You had the top 15 students in every class. And Ray Green and I were 2 of the top 15 from our class. And we wrote articles that were published in the Buffalo Law Review. I graduated in June of 1956, and as soon as I finished my last exam, I went to the airport and caught a plane and came home. Because the year before, my daughter had been born. And she was here with my wife, who lived with my mother and my aunt and an uncle. And June was working at the Birmingham Board of Education. She had graduated from Talladega the year after I graduated. And she got a job as a teacher, and she taught at Lewis School. And I'm sure many of you know about Lewis School. Well, anyway, I began practicing law, and when I obtained my license to practice, I made the 9th black to have a license to practice law in the city of Birmingham. The 9th in Birmingham, the 13th in the entire state. Today, there are over 1,000 blacks that are practicing law in the state of Alabama. And here's the anomaly. 12 years after I began practicing, the dean of the law school, Dean Christopher, came to my office and asked me if I'd come to Tuscaloosa and teach a class at the law school. And I'm saying to myself, well, I was too dumb to be admitted here 12 years ago, and now you want me to teach. I didn't say anything to him about it. I just said, yes, I'll be happy to do it. And so I taught at the university for 25 consecutive years. And during that time that I was practicing law and teaching at the University of Alabama, Mr. E.M. Friend, General Friend, who was one of the partners at Sirote and Perman, that was a Jewish law firm, came to me and said, it's time for you to come over to our firm and join us and just close your firm down. And General Friend was the type of guy that you didn't argue with. If he said something, you did it. So I went to Sirote, and I went there 44 years ago. And I've been there ever since. No one has ever said anything of a derogatory nature to me, and I haven't said anything derogatory to them. There are 3 others that, when I say others, I'm talking about other blacks, that are lawyers with Sirote, and we all get along very well. And I have taught at Sirote. Down at the University of Alabama, I've taught 60 students each semester for 25 years. 60 per class. That's 120, 100 a year, isn't it? 2 times 60, 102 years. Yes, I can still count. And of those 60, at one time, 40 of them were lawyers at Sirote, and so they would come into the firm and just become a colleague of mine, even though I had taught them in law school. And I thought that that was an anomaly. 2 years after I began practicing law, in 1962, was when I began my civil rights career. Most people think that civil rights began in 1960. 1863. Long before then. Arthur Shores, many of you remember him, don't you? He was the first black lawyer who went to court. Now, there had been two other lawyers in the city of Birmingham, Mr. E.A. Brown, Edward A. Brown, and Mr. L.L. Chambliss. Mr. Chambliss has a grandson who has practiced in Birmingham even today and has been a judge. So I thought that would be very good to tell you about.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. JaiGregory, would you like to tell us your impressions of the film?
I cannot follow that. My resume is not nearly as impressive, but thank you for the visit.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Am I taking up too much time?
Is there another? Do you want to speak on the film?
I thought it was, hi. I was caught up in the history of the movement and the involvement. But that's the same thing that impressed me about the film was how encouraging and informative it was. The testimonials were heart-wrenching. And to Mr. Dees' point about the struggle continuing, one thing about the film that stood out to me was the institutions that everyone was up against and how that has exponentially grown over time. That at that time they were up against the police department, the sheriff's department, and the state troopers. But now we're fighting the attorney general, the secretary of state, half of Congress, and so forth and so on. So to Jerome's point, the struggle certainly continues. And thanks to great documentary work like we've just witnessed, we're able to be encouraged and have a roadmap for how to continue for this next generation.
Thank you. The film includes stories, many of them yours, sitting up here today, of people who fought and suffered and even died to obtain the right to vote for all Americans. So my question for you is, what do you notice about the passion in voters today? Has there been a change, or is it the same? How does this movie inspire our passion for voting? Who would like to go first?
I can tell you a little bit about that. I became a registered voter in 1958. Everybody in my family was a registered voter. It was quite an anomaly, because in most families, you didn't have any blacks that were voters. But in Birmingham, there were 4,000 blacks that had the right to vote. During that period of time, there was a statute that allowed the Board of Registrars to administer a test to everybody that came to register to vote. Everybody. But they only administered that test to blacks. And that was known as a literacy test. So if you can read and write, you are literate, are you not? I went down to register, and I was able to read the questionnaire and answer it and write my answers. And when I finished doing that, I thought I'd get a registration slip, and the lady who administered it to me said, "No, I've got to ask you a question." And she said, "Would you explain to me the 14th Amendment?" I had just finished taking in law school. a year's course in constitutional law. So I'm wondering to myself, this lady either can't read and write, or she doesn't understand the answers I put on the application. So I began to explain the 14th Amendment. And she didn't have the slightest idea of what I was talking about. I told her the same thing that the dean had told me when he was teaching the course. She didn't understand a word of that. But she says, if you are so smart, tell me whether or not there is a lady in the Senate. I said, yes, ma'am, there is. There's one. And she said, who is it? And I said, her name is Mrs. Margaret Chase Smith, and she lives in the state of Maine. That lady was so exasperated with me that she slammed her hands down on the counter, and I hope I'm not going to offend anybody, but she said, oh, hell, just let this nigga vote.
Thank you for your passion for voting.
And he pointed at me. Oh, okay. I'm like, Jay, you know, I could listen to you all night. But I wanted to talk about how the difference in the people who are voting now and how we, I kind of understand it. You know, the voter apathy, we've been voting since 1965. Where are we on the chain? Still low man on totem pole. We're still struggling for the same thing. I never thought all these years later we'd still be struggling for the same thing. So I sort of understand why people, particularly people who look like me, stopped voting, right? Because they didn't see any advantages in it. That the Democrats don't court us. Mm-hmm. They don't court us because they're so sure people who look like me are going to vote for them. The Republicans don't court us, and I'm kind of glad, because they know we're not. We're not going to vote for them. They're, to me, young people, there has to be a way to bring us together where we can show our strength, and then we can have some collective change. I believe people of color need their own party. We don't need to be Democrat or Republican. We need to be black people. BIPOC people.
Yeah.
That new expression, BIPOC, you know, black and whatever it stands for. But we need to find a way where our voices can be heard. And even though we make strides, it seems as though every time we make one step forward, they knock us back too. We have to find a way where we can reinforce that and not have to step back, keep going forward.
Anyone else want to share on that?
I think the one thing that I would add is that, without getting too much kind of into the weeds, I mean, if you look at data over the past 30 or 40 some odd years, if you break it down by generation, each first presidential election cycle of a particular generation is typically the highest voter turnout for that generation. In 1992, Gen X turned out at its highest percentage, and then it slowly declined. My generation as a millennial, 2008. Everybody knows we saw record turnouts for that, and then there was a steady decline to about 40%, which is kind of what we've typically seen. And then 2020 happens, the first real big election cycle for the new Gen Z, and we saw, again, record turnout. And so I think part of the issue is that, as you said, that people get motivated, they turn out and vote, and then a lot of those same issues that we've pushed and talked about they never get resolved. And so that apathy starts to set in. And so the next election cycle, fewer of them turn out. And then the next election cycle, fewer of them turn out. And so I think the thing that I want to drive home is that young folks care about the issues. If you get into a conversation with young folks, they care about their community. They care about things like education and whether or not they're going to be able to afford housing. And so I think it's important that at a kind of multi-leveled approach that we are able to kind of connect, make sure that we connect voting to each of those specific issues. So whether it's criminal justice reform, whether it is climate change or a host of any other issues, just making sure that we drive home that, voting is the primary lever by which we are able to kind of directly engage with our government.
Thank you. Next question. What would you say to someone who said they were not planning to vote in 4 weeks? Actions more powerful than words.
I actually came up with my own slogan. I let people know that if you see someone who says, I'm not going to vote, then I need you to tell them you met a woman who at the age of 14 went to jail 9 times, twice in a state prison camp, who at the age of 14 was beaten on a bridge, receiving 35 stitches for that right, who at the age of 14 became the youngest name on the official list of 300 that was allowed to walk from Selma to Montgomery. She turned 15 on the second day of that march, and she completed the entire 54 miles. Tell them she said, if you don't want to go vote for yourself and your household, then go vote for her 35 stitches.
All right. All right.
I'm trying not to get 35 too.
So the film mentioned that there have been a lot of restrictive voting practices put into place. Since 2013, we have actually gone backwards in time when it comes to access to voting. And so I know there's a lot of reasons that were listed in the film, but I wonder if any of you want to lift up the one you are most concerned about. JaiGregory?
House Bill 100 that passed this past session added convictions to the list of crimes of moral turpitude, and it added a category of crimes called inchoate convictions, which are attempted solicitation and conspiracy. So that means you don't actually, commit murder. Maybe you attempt murder or conspiracy to murder or solicit someone to murder. All right. All of those convictions now carry disqualifying penalties, and so that in effect cubed the number of disqualifying convictions because it adds those 3 categories to every conviction that's on the list. But what's most disturbing, and the reason why that particular law is personally my enemy, is that the bill is written so unclearly that it's not clear whether or not it can be applied retroactively. And so I have an inchoate conviction that never cost me my right to vote before. And I never had to get it cleared up, even though it's on my record. I did have a conviction that was disqualifying that I got cleared up, got my right to vote back in 2022, and now I could lose my right to vote again without having committed any felony charge if they apply this law retroactively with its inchoate convictions. So that bill to me is particularly heinous because it can reach back and grab so many of us who have taken the necessary steps to rebuild our lives, get our voting rights back, become contributing members to our society, and all of that can be just snatched from up under us. And I think that is very malicious, and I'm part of litigation right now against that very law.
Thank you.
And I think what JaiGregory is talking about is particularly crystallizing for, I think, all of us that care about all of these issues, because we think about life in Alabama, in the South, in the 1870s, in the Reconstruction era, in the 1930s, under the Jim Crow era. What we are seeing now in the 2020s is James Crow Esquire. That it's not these retributive, oppressive laws that engage in necessarily physical violence, but they are oppressive nonetheless. They are attempts at dialing back and creating a second-class citizenship again in Alabama. So there's HB 100 that JaiGregory just laid out. Obviously, SB 1, the criminalization of assistance of filling out the absentee ballot application. Not the ballot itself, the application for the ballot. Creating Class B and Class C felonies for just assisting your neighbor in filling out that packet. You get that Class C or B felony, you are now looped into those crimes involving moral turpitudes, and so now not only are you a part of the criminal justice system, but now you've lost your right to vote. We know how that's connected directly to opportunities for employment and for housing. And so once again, you end up right back to where you are in the 1870s, in the 1860s. And so I really want to drive home the fact that, again, like, the struggle continues. And it is incumbent upon us to remain vigilant, and to remain steadfast, but also to remain encouraged. And to look to the left, to the right, at your neighbor, and know that you are in this fight together, that we are not in this alone, and that there are people all across the city, across the state, and across this country who are not going back, who will continue to move forward.
When I took the mic from you, I thought I was angry, but you said everything I wanted to say in $5 words, because I would have used 50-cent words. Break it down. Yeah, I would have used 50-cent words, but you did good. He managed to throw some dollar words in there. But I think that's what keeps us going. You know, I thought by now I'd be enjoying life, and we'd be living in the beloved community. And every day there's something that makes you know that you have not arrived. There's, you know, a lot of people think we arrived. Oh, you elected a Negro president, you arrived. Negro, please. White folks, too. No. It's, that struggle is real, and it continues, and it takes everybody. That the hardest thing for me is to convince a poor white person that the same laws they make to stop to oppress me, oppress them too. Okay, they think because of the color of their skin, they you know, they got it. They think they're better than I am. But if they only could understand that they're being oppressed too. They join me in that fight. We have to find a way to change hearts. We have to change hearts. We can't just talk about it. Even I walk the walk daily, and I like to make two corrections while in my bio. I don't know where you get that trash from. I haven't been at the museum since '07. I'm the founder of FootSoldiersPark.org. Okay, so.
I will get it corrected.
Yeah, I left the museum in '07 and opened my own company, Journeys for the Soul. And to my knowledge, I was not the youngest person. I remember the first time I was arrested, I was 8 years old, and I was with my grandmother. And the other women had their babies with them, some armed babies, some toddlers just walking. And I counted as an arrest because they put us in the cell together with our parents. Where else were they going to put us? I remember playing on the floor with the young ones, so they were in jail just like me. Wow. And in the film, you saw Cheyenne Christberg, Cheyenne Webb. I grew up with Chey. I'm about 3 years older than she was, and she was there. Okay, I don't know was she arrested or not, but they were there. There were lots of young people younger than me, so I don't want to claim anything that I'm not. I'm great without that.
You are. I want to open it up
I've seen it all change. The two acts that were passed by the United States Congress that have really changed the lives of all black people are the Civil Rights Act, 1964, and even more important than that, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. When those two acts were passed, a year apart, in '65, you had formally had to go to the Jefferson County Courthouse to both register to vote and to carry any complaint that you had about your voting rights that you didn't take into the federal court. The entire lobby of the old post office, y'all remember the old post office on 5th Avenue North, has been converted over to two United States federal courts and the bankruptcy court. But before then, it was all post office. All of the lobby was changed. All of the furniture was removed from there. Tables were put there, and United States registrars were sent here from Washington, and they began registering black folks by the hundreds every day. Can you remember that? You don't remember it, do you? Before that time, if 2 or 3 black people were registered to vote, as I told you I was in 1958, this was before then. And in 1965, it all changed. There had been 4,000 black voters in Birmingham in 1963 when we changed the form of government and put in a mayor-council form of government and got rid of Bull Connor. That was 1963. And within 2 years' time, the number of black people that were voters had exceeded 100,000. 100,000. I can see where young people can get discouraged, but they didn't live prior to 1965. When were you born?
79.
When were you born? 88. Am I right when I say that there are over 100,000 black registered voters in Jefferson County? Yeah.
Unfortunately, though, if you don't mind. Does anybody know what the voter turnout was for the March primaries for Birmingham? 18%. 18% of those eligible to vote in Birmingham voted in the March primaries. Do you know what the turnout was for the runoff election that we had right after the March primaries? 8. Single digits. 8% for this area.
That was in District 52.
And even though that's very discouraging, even though it's a shame and we've got to do better, it gives us a very distinct opportunity, because voter turnout is not just low amongst African Americans or other minorities. Voter turnout is low amongst all voters.
That's right.
And so if we get our stuff together, if we get our money, our motivation, and the media together, and mobilize the active voters that we can make a difference, because it doesn't take as many votes to swing elections when voter turnout is so low. So that's good reason to keep pushing.
Amen.
You can do this. Look at what he's talking about. You have the right to vote, but you don't exercise the right to vote. But when I came along, you didn't have. You had the right to vote, but you didn't have the opportunity to vote. I remember in 1962, I represented over 50 black men who had lost their right to vote because the registrars, based on their own discretion, had disqualified them from voting because they had been divorced by their wives, and the complaint in the divorce said that it was based on cruelty. So I went up and I represented them, and I asked the registrar, are the people here that have been disqualified, all the people that have been disqualified? And she said, yes. And I said, no whites? And she said, no. And I said, none of them have been divorced? And she said, yes. Have any of them been divorced based on the cause of action of cruelty? She says, no. And in order to get a divorce, do you have to have physical cruelty or mental cruelty? She said, both. All of the people that I represented were reinstated as voters. But you can see, based on that, for me, that was a small matter. That was a small matter. But today, you don't have that anymore. I heard what both these lawyers said. we could vote if we wanted to vote, can't we? Can't we? But we don't think that it's important because we have other things to do.
Thank you. Does anyone in the audience have a question for our illustrious panel? We'll just do a couple. Yeah. Oh, okay.
What you just said about voting,
Can you,
people,
Kylie?
young people, Zen, G, Z, H, Y, whichever one you want.
Whatever.
Okay, I'm 20-year vet, okay? And I remember when I came into the service, I don't need that. Okay, well, when I came into the service, there were 3 guys in front of me. I was a 1-striper, they were 4-stripers. And what they told me was, if you stay, you're gonna stand on our shoulders and take it higher, okay? So what I'm saying is, no matter where you are and what you do, it's about motivation to get the gen, whichever alphabet we're on, to get them interested and motivated to go forward with what's coming. That's why we keep repeating what's been happening 60 years ago. If you look at everything that this 2025 and all the rest of that mess says, it's the same thing that you, sir, 60 years ago as the first 11 lawyers in the state, it's the same thing you were fighting.
That's right.
Now,
That's
the
right.
problem is that we can't get the 2 young men, because I'm gonna use them as an excuse. These 2 young men, their generations, if you go talk to them, they don't have time. Because they're not hungry for what the vote would give them because they see no results from what they've been getting right now. So if you want to change it, you got to get the young people hungry for results. And that means, like, I'm not from Alabama, okay? I'm from California. One thing I've never understood here was, why does Alabama have a state constitution that's thicker than the United States Constitution? What goes on in this state that they got more words on paper than anybody else?
That's right.
I stop right there before I go too far.
Thank you. Thank you. And back there.
Coming to you.
First of all, thank you to everyone here today. It's been fabulous. My question is, if we're, as a country, trying to be a democracy where we rule by our votes, why is, particularly every 4 years at a minimum, why is it not a national holiday on a day that we vote? Because it's incredibly hard, particularly for working people, to vote.
Does anyone want to address that?
You know, you should talk to your politicians about that. Why it's not a national holiday? Why? How do we start to make it a holiday? That is it something we bring up to our politicians and say we need this? Because we do. I agree with you on what it should be, but I don't have the answer to how you started. How you started to make it. And then we have so many issues. So many issues, and we're so scattered with these issues. You're champion this, and you're champion that, and I'm champion this, and I think it's designed that way. So that's just one more area to pull us. Yeah. So it's needed, don't get me wrong. I totally agree with you, it should be a holiday, but it's not. You know the fight we had to get Dr. Martin Luther King Day? And how long it took? I used to smoke, I'm not gonna make it. Yeah. So how do we plant the seeds in our young people? We teach them where we've been, so they'll know where we're going, so they can take us where we need to go. The school systems are awful with that. So where do we start? Where do we start? They took civics out. I learned about government from civics classes. Did you have a civic? 1988, my God.
I did have a AP government class. So
Okay, good.
It at least made it into the 2000s.
You notice he said AP government class.
Yeah.
If I could try and answer your question. Systems are designed to achieve specific results. So I think the reality of what we see right now is not by happenstance or by circumstance. The results that we see are designed to be the way that they are. And to tie back to the reference that the gentleman made about like what we're seeing with Project 2025 and the comments that I made previously, ultimately this is all a discussion about who deserves to have a say in this country, whose voice actually matters. And that discussion goes beyond race, it goes beyond class. It is a particular idea of who is American. And so that is a big part of the challenge of trying to get something like a national election holiday that we see in other developed countries around the world, where you get a paid day off to go and vote, and they have voter turnout in 70, 80% regularly. In some countries, it's even mandatory. But that's, again, because they actually desire to hear the will of the voice of the people. And historically in America, we have not wanted to hear the will and the voice of the people. And we have consistently, since 1619, put laws in place to make sure that certain segments of the population do not have that voice, or if they fight hard enough and are able to get that voice, that we make it as challenging for them as possible. And so we make it really hard for you all to be able to get an excuse to get that absentee ballot, or we make sure that there's no public transportation that runs directly to your area. So even if you are able to get off work, there's no way that you can get to the polling place and back in time. So again, I mean, it gets back to changing the hearts and minds of enough of the general public to deeply care and see themselves and their neighbor who looks different than them as a part of the broader American experiment. But the simple solution, the TLDR of all this is, I mean, it could be done at the state legislative level and kind of build up from there, and ultimately federal legislation that's passed. But I mean, we're still busy trying to remove Confederate memorial holidays and monuments down here. So the work continues on that as well.
Thank you. There was one more question up here.
The mic's on this side, sorry. Camera's on that side.
So I'm blessed to be part of the leadership team for the League of Women Voters of Alabama. We do all the grassroots voter registration, restoration, education, but a new tool that we put in our toolbox in the last few years, along with our friends at Faith in Action and Southern Poverty Law Center, is lots of litigation. We're currently in 2 lawsuits and considering a 3rd. But the justice system moves very slowly. And the legislation is coming enormously fast, really, really bad, suppressive legislation. And I'm wondering, for those of you who work in policy and law, do you think we're going to be able to legislate lawsuits? Are we going to be able to get out from under this through the legal system? Is it going to work fast enough?
No. I think that the political system has to change from a representative standpoint. So to Jerome's point, this is a democracy that is not really interested in everyone's voice. And the truth of the matter is that this is not a democracy. When you say the Pledge of Allegiance, you pledge your allegiance to the republic for which it stands. This is a representative government, and As much as I would love to see a national holiday for the general election, to your point, sir, what we can be sure of is that they will not make holidays for every local election that is had in different cities and counties across the country. And in my opinion, those are more critical to our daily lives than the general election is. So my view, to answer your question on how do we work within the legal system or political system to create change, we have to start at the local level and make changes in our community where we live, and thereby we whet the appetites of the young people by granting a victory. If I can get a change made in Birmingham, Alabama, then maybe we can get momentum from that victory and carry that over to Montgomery. Get something done at the state level, and once we get something done there, then we move to the federal. Now, is that going to happen quickly? Absolutely not. But we can start where we are with what we have right now.
Did you want to address it? I'd like to. Okay. All right. I know we are way past time, but it has been such a joy to speak with each of you. My final question is, if you could encourage us to do one thing prior to November 6th, and then if you could encourage us to do one thing after November 6th, what would those two things be? Yeah. There you go.
Okay. Prior to November 6th, you need to stand up and put the word human back into humanity. That should lead you to the polls. Once you go to the polls and vote, you need to stay standing, and put the word human back in the word humanity, and show that to the person sitting beside you, standing in front or behind you, and pray. And I'm pretty sure at some point it will catch on.
Thank you.
That's how we're going to bring change, permanent change, positive change. I don't have a long time to be here. I will not see that change, but I do have a great-grandchild. I want him to see it. And you are going to bring it. You're going to help bring it. That song, Glory. Common said you need the wisdom of the elders and the energy of the young. But Lynda Blackman Lowery says, you need the wisdom of the elders, because if you don't know where you've been, you won't understand why you're where you're at, and you will not know how to go further.
Amen.
We need that wisdom, but we also, we need the energy and the knowledge of the young. Now, you heard these two men, these two young men, these Gen X's and C's and whatever, and they have wisdom, and they're going to be the ones to help take my great-grandson and us further. They will. And if change is going to come, permanent change, I see the human, the caring in these young men, as I see in a lot of you. And if change is going to come, it's going to be like Sam Cooke says, a change is going to come. Thank you.
Okay, I can think of one thing that you can be doing now, talking to people about voting and the importance of it. And then when you go to the poll, make sure you don't go alone. You take some people with you, you know, and sometimes it takes organization, sometimes it takes just looking across the dinner table. You got to make sure that everyone who has the opportunity goes to the poll. Now, one of the things is we always start, get all excited when the election is election year, you know? And when we've been complacent the whole year, the whole 4 years before that, right? Then we start to try to get people to the polls and talk about the low turnout and all of that, when we should have been working day to day. Day to day. This never stops. One of the things I started in Selma, and I hope it catches on through the state, is a program called Yours. You owning up to your responsibility to the system. Yes. We go into the high schools once a month, and we register every child that turned 18 in that month. We give them a cupcake to celebrate, and a cup of ice cream. The first school we went into when we instituted the program was Selma High, my alma mater. I integrated that school, but it was Albert George Parish then. We registered 58 students and 1 teacher. Wow. Yeah. We haven't been able to top that, but because all the other schools are smaller. But we're doing something. And that program will go on and on and on and on. And my administrative assistant, better known as my granddaughter, who calls me Nana, is going to pass out some cards. If you want more information, please contact me, because I would love to see you working day after day after day coming up to all these elections. Because, as he said, our local elections are even more important than this general election, because these are the people who enforce the laws and affect your life the most, the people you see every day and where you live. So you got to work. We got work to do. And let's start with our young people and teaching them the importance of voting. And I think they'll take us all the way. You want to tell them?
If I could ask you to do something before the November election, there are about 13 days left to register to vote. 4 of those days are weekends, so you're talking about 9 weekdays. In those 9 weekdays that are left, I challenge you to find 2 people that need help registering to vote and get them registered. And then in the couple of weeks between October 17th and November 5th, make sure they have rides to the polls, that they're able to access their polling location. 2 people. And then what I would ask you to do after November the 5th is continue to mentor those same 2 people through the upcoming local elections. Here in Birmingham, we have all the mayoral and council elections in 2025. We have, in the state of Alabama, we have midterm elections in 2026 and gubernatorial election. So it's more important now than ever that we continue. It's not just about the general election in November. It's a great kickstart, but there are important elections coming up for us here locally, and I would challenge you to secure 2 people to the voting polls for November the 5th, and keep those same 2 people involved through 2025.
The one thing that I would say, in addition to all of that incredibly practical advice, is after November 5th, November 6th, find your Selma. Find what it is that drives you, that you are willing to work and push and get beat down, but get back up and try and get beat down and get back up and keep trying. There are countless issues in this state that are worth fighting for, that are uphill battles, that are uphill climbs. And there are communities that are already engaging in that work that you can come alongside and join. If you find that issue that drives you, that animates you, that motivates you, and you share that with folks who are in your sphere of influence, in your circle, and particularly if you're able to connect young folks to that, that is how you'll be able to connect that new generation to voting. Because they're likely not going to turn out to vote just because you say vote. But if you connect it to an issue that they deeply care about, and if they see that you are passionate about it, that you are willing to work and face rejection and continue to struggle through because it matters to you, that is what will animate them and continue to see them turn out in those local elections, in those state elections, and ultimately in those federal elections.
Another idea that the producers would like me to share with you is you can host your own screening of Bending the Arc, the Vote, what we just saw tonight. A very powerful film that will help everyone to think and remember why it is so important to go vote. They have also published a handy-dandy discussion guide. So if you want to, show it to a group of people and then have a discussion afterward, you are certainly able to do so as well. And there are options in there as well of things to do, encouraging your representatives to vote for the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. Both of those are really important. We also have an opportunity in Alabama. We have a brand new congressional district. So if you have anyone who lives in District 2, especially reach out to them and make sure they're registered and have a ride to the polls. And if you heard our Secretary of State a few weeks ago, everyone in this room needs to check your voter registration status because they are trying to purge the polls ahead of the election. And we actually have volunteers out in the narthex who can help you do that after our program. And you can also work with our voting rights advocacy groups to get people registered and transport people to the polls. But most importantly, we hope each of you will take this sacred honor upon you, this sacred task, and go to the polls and place your vote. It is so important, and it is life-saving and life-preserving to do so. With that, I ask you to help me thank our beautiful and wonderful panel. Thanks for coming. Have a lovely evening. Oh, are you singing one more time? No?